Tour de France 2017, Peter Sagan appeals against disqualification over Mark Cavendish crash. World champion Peter Sagan's team have appealed against his disqualification from the Tour de France for causing the crash which ended Mark Cavendish's race. The Briton accused Sagan, 27, of elbowing him during the sprint finish to stage 4 in Vittel. Cavendish, 32, crashed into the barriers and later pulled out of the race with a broken shoulder. Bora Hansgrohe said Slovak Sagan stayed on his line in the sprint and could not see Cavendish on the right side. Sagan added, "Mark was coming really fast from the back and I just didn't have time to react and to go left. He came into me and he went into the fence. When I was told after the finish that Mark had crashed, I went straight away to find out how he was doing. We are friends and colleagues in the peloton and crashes like that are never nice. I hope Mark recovers soon." Cavendish hits the deck. Listen to commentary of crash. Was it right to disqualify Sagan? Dimension data writer Cavendish said immediately after the stage, "I get on well with Peter and a crash is a crash, but I'm not a fan of him putting his elbow in." Sagan, who finished second, was initially docked 30 seconds and 80 points, but Dimension data contested that decision. After a review, Philippe Marine, president of the race commission, said Sagan was disqualified because he endangered some of his colleagues seriously. The sprint Briton Geraint Thomas kept his overall lead as Arnaud Démare became the first Frenchman to win a bunch sprint stage at the Tour since 2006. Defending champion Chris Froome remains second overall, 12 seconds behind compatriot Thomas. The sprint for the line was in full flow with Cavendish tracking Démare down the right-hand side of the road with the riders traveling at about 60 km per hour. Sagan also moved to his right to use Démare as a lead-out man and, from cameras behind the race, seemed to flick an elbow out at Cavendish as they battled for space. The camera angle from the front suggested Sagan was trying to keep his balance, but Cavendish was left with nowhere to go except into the barriers. Cavendish, who has won 30 Tour de France stages, 4 behind the all-time, said Sagan apologized to him after the stage. The Manxman landed heavily on the right shoulder that he dislocated when he crashed out on stage 1 of the 2014 Tour de France in Harrogate. His right hand was bandaged before he remounted his bike and pedaled over the line. An X-ray later revealed a fractured right shoulder. Sagan, who was aiming to equal Erik Zabel's record of winning 6 successive points classification titles, stayed upright to finish second on the stage before he was disqualified. Dimension Data sporting director Roger Hammond tweeted an overhead view of the incident with the words, "Causes a big crash at 1.5 to go, elbows fellow competitor in the head 300 meters. Can only result in one decision. Number goodbye." Extremely harsh to disqualify Sagan. Analysis. Former GB cyclist Rob Hales on BBC Radio 5 Live. Cavendish was unlucky to come off the worst. I also think Sagan has come off unlucky. It is extremely harsh. He was in a position he couldn't get himself out of. The bike was coming from underneath him and the elbow coming up is a natural instinct of the rider. He was off balance as well. It is true from first look it appears that he gets his elbow up and whack. Have some of that, Cavendish. It made it look worse than it was. Initially we heard that they had relegated Sagan to the back of the peloton in a 30-second penalty. I thought that was fair. Something had to be done and they needed to make a decision. An hour later they disqualified him. It is bad for Sagan and really bad for the race, the world champion with a potential green jersey going home. It is a brave decision by the commissaires. They have said it is an irregular sprint. That is sprinting, they are all irregular. Had Sagan not done what he did, he would have gone down himself. He had nowhere to go other than to put his brakes on, and they don't do that. Thomas retains race lead. The 207 km stage from Monderflay-Bains had been a relatively sedate race after Belgian Guillaume van Keersbulke made a solo break from the start. He led for around 191 km, building a lead of 13 minutes, before being caught by the pelotonners jostled to get their riders in the best positions. Welshman Thomas was also brought down in a separate crash in the closing stages but said, "Luckily I took off most of the speed." He said Team Sky teammate Froome was also okay after being held up by the incident. Thomas crossed the line more than 2 minutes after De Meyer, but because the crash happened in the final 3 kilometers on a designated sprint stage, he was credited with the same time as the winner and retains the yellow jersey. Alexander Kristoff was promoted to second and Andre Greipel third after the disqualification of Sagan. All the other general classification riders finished with the same time, meaning no significant changes in the standings. Stage 5 is the first mountaintop finish of the race, at La Planche des Belles Filles, the scene of Froome's first Tour stage win in 2012. Thanks you. And subscribe channel.